$50 for gas? My brother laughed, humiliating me in front of his squadron. Then the commander stood up and said, General Yorke, recipient of the Air Force Cross. The room went silent. The $50 bill felt like paper fire in my palm. For gas, Dylan, my brother said, voice pitched loud enough to carry across the officers' club, since I know that IT salary doesn't exactly stretch far. The pilots around him laughed, not polite laughter, the kind that says someone just scored a point. We were at Langley Air Force Base, dark mahogany panels, polished brass fixtures, dress uniforms everywhere. My brother's world, not mine, or so everyone thought. Captain James Brennan, fighter pilot, golden child, the son who made our father proud by following him into combat aviation. I stood near the bar in a suit I'd bought off the rack at Macy's, suddenly hyper-aware of how cheap the fabric looked under these lights. Guys, this is my older brother, James announced, draping his arm around my shoulders like we were close. Like he hadn't avoided my calls for 6 months. He does computer work for the government. More laughter. Someone raised a glass. Hey, somebody's got to keep the Wi-Fi running, right? James grinned. That practiced, camera-ready grin that had been on the cover of Air Force magazine last year. I didn't grin back. Across the room, I caught my father watching. Colonel Robert Brennan, retired, 28 years of service, chest full of medals he'd earned flying F-15s in 2 different conflicts. Our eyes met for half a second. He shook his head slightly. The message was clear. Don't make a scene. The familiar tightness started in my chest. That old reflex from childhood. Stay quiet. Don't embarrass the family. Let James have his moment. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Not my regular phone. The other one. I slipped my hand into my jacket, thumb brushing the encrypted device that only 17 people in the world had the number to. The screen lit with a single line of text. Nightfall operation complete. Assets secure. Well done, General. The room tilted slightly. 16 hours ago, I'd been standing in a windowless room 3 levels below the Pentagon, making decisions that would never earn applause. Only absence. Absence of casualties. Absence of international incidents. Absence of war. Now I stood in this officers' club with $50 burning in my hand, while my brother basked in a tension he assumed I'd never understand. I excused myself quietly and walked down the hallway, away from the noise and laughter. The wall of honor lined one side of the corridor. Portraits of generals and admirals, most of them men my father had served with or admired. In the glass reflection, my face overlapped with theirs. I remembered being 12 years old. Christmas morning. James ripping open a model F-16 while Dad beamed with pride. My gift? A book about computers, given kindly but dismissively, with the unspoken message that it was fine for some people to be interested in that sort of thing. That was the year I learned what counted in the Brennan family. I sat on a bench beneath those portraits and breathed until the sting faded. Then I stood, straightened my tie, and walked back toward the club. The evening wasn't over. Neither was I. I'd been living 2 lives for 11 years. Most people knew Dylan Brennan as a mid-level analyst at some vague government agency. The kind of job that made eyes glaze over at family gatherings. Something with computers and national security, I'd say. And people would nod politely before changing the subject. My apartment was modest. My car was a 4-year-old Honda Accord. I shopped at Target and ate lunch at Chipotle. Everything about my visible life said ordinary. But 3 times a week, I descended into facilities that didn't appear on any map. Facilities where I briefed generals and senators, where my recommendations became presidential orders, where I ran operations that kept Americans alive in ways they'd never know about. At 34, I was the youngest brigadier general in Air Force intelligence history. My official title was Deputy Director of Special Access Programs. My actual job was making impossible decisions in situations where every option was terrible, and I had to choose the least terrible one. The clearance level required to know I existed was so high that my own family didn't qualify. My father thought I pushed papers at Fort Meade. My mother thought I did something technical that she didn't understand. And James, Golden Boy James with his magazine covers and his public heroics, thought I was a keyboard warrior who couldn't hack it in the real military. I'd stopped correcting them years ago, partly because my security clearance literally forbade me from discussing my work, but mostly because I'd gotten tired of the pity in their eyes when I tried to explain that yes, I was proud of what I did, and no, I didn't wish I'd become a pilot instead. Tonight's event was James's promotion ceremony. Captain to major. A big deal in aviation circles. Dad had flown in from Arizona, Mom from her condo in Florida, the whole Brennan clan reuniting to celebrate James's ascent. I'd been invited as an afterthought. The email from James came 2 weeks before the event. Hey bro, having a thing at Langley. You should come if you're free. Would be good to see you. No phone call, no personal invitation, just a casual email sent at 11:47 p.m. like he'd suddenly remembered he had a brother. I'd almost declined. Then General Sterling's office had called. General Everett Sterling was the commander of Air Force intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. 2 decades of service, more classified operations than I could count, and a reputation for protecting his people with the ferocity of a protective parent. He'd personally recruited me out of MIT when I was 23, and showing up Pentagon cybersecurity analysts with a graduate thesis that identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in military networks. You could make millions in Silicon Valley, he'd said during our first meeting, or you could save save lives. Your choice. I'd chosen lives. Now, 11 years later, Sterling was something between a mentor and a second father, the kind who actually understood what I did for a living. His assistant had called 3 days before James's ceremony. The general would like to see you, today, if possible. I'd driven to his office at Bolling Air Force Base, where he'd been waiting with a file folder marked with classification stamps I'd only seen a handful of times. Sit, he'd said, skipping pleasantries. I sat. Operation Nightfall is greenlit. Presidential authorization came through this morning. You'll be operational commander. My heart had jumped. Nightfall was an operation I'd designed 6 months earlier, a cyber intervention to prevent a hostile nation from downing a military transport aircraft carrying 247 American service members. We'd been tracking the threat for 8 months. Signals intelligence suggested they'd compromised our navigation systems. If we didn't neutralize the threat, the plane would accidentally crash, and 247 families would get folded flags. When? I'd asked. 48 hours. Which means you'll miss most of your brother's ceremony. I'll make it work. Sterling had studied me. I've been following your family situation. I'd tensed. Sir, my family doesn't affect my work. I know that, but I also know your brother's promotion is this weekend. I know your father doesn't understand what you do, and I know, he'd paused, choosing words carefully. I know what it's like to be the invisible one. That had surprised me. Sterling was a 3-star general. Invisible wasn't a word I associated with him. My brother was a fighter pilot too, Sterling had continued. Flew F-15s. Very visible, very celebrated. I spent 20 years in intelligence. Know what my father said when I made general? That's nice, but did you see your brother's air-to-air score? We'd sat in silence for a moment. I'm not bitter about it, I'd said, though we both knew that was only partially true. You don't have to be bitter to deserve recognition. Sterling had slid a second folder across his desk. This is a declassification order, signed by the president, effective the moment nightfall is complete. I'd opened it. The first page listed my name, rank, and a summary of classified operations I'd commanded over the past 11 years. The second page was a commendation recommendation for the Air Force Cross, the nation's second highest military decoration. Sir, I don't need— This isn't about what you need, Sterling had interrupted. It's about what's right. You've saved more American lives than most combat pilots will in their entire careers. The fact that your work is classified doesn't make it less heroic. It just makes it invisible. My family still won't understand. Maybe not, but they'll see you. Finally, he'd explained the plan then. Operation Nightfall would execute during James's promotion ceremony. If successful, when successful, the operation would be immediately declassified as a demonstration of American cyber capability, a warning to adversaries, and I would be publicly recognized at my brother's event. I don't want to steal his moment, I'd said. Sterling's expression had hardened. He gave you $50 for gas last year, at your birthday dinner, in front of the whole family. I'd forgotten he knew about that. Then again, Sterling made it his business to know things. This isn't about stealing moments, Sterling had continued. It's about the truth. Your work matters. You matter. And it's time your family understood that. I'd executed Operation Nightfall from a secure facility in Crystal City. 12 hours of real-time cyber warfare. My team, 8 of the best offensive cyber operators in the Department of Defense, against a hostile nation's military intelligence network. We'd identified the compromised navigation systems, isolated the malicious code, reverse-engineered the trigger mechanism. Then we'd fed them false data while simultaneously patching our vulnerabilities. At 4:47 a.m., the hostile nation attempted to activate their weapon. It failed. The transport aircraft continued safely to its destination. 247 Americans came home to their families, completely unaware of how close they'd come to disaster. Mission success. I'd showered and changed in the facility's quarters, then driven straight to Langley for James's ceremony. Arrived 15 minutes late, exhausted, running on coffee and adrenaline, just in time for my brother to hand me $50 and make me the punchline of a joke. When I returned to the officers' club, the ceremony was beginning. James stood at the front of the room in his dress uniform, looking every inch the fighter pilot hero. Square-jawed, confident, comfortable in the spotlight. Behind him, a screen showed footage of F-22 Raptors slicing through blue sky. Powerful, majestic, visible. The master of ceremonies, a full colonel whose name tag read Davidson, spoke in that practiced voice military officers develop for formal occasions. Captain James Brennan has distinguished himself through exceptional skill, leadership, and dedication to the defense of our nation. Applause rippled through the room. He has completed 3 combat deployments, logged over 800 flight hours in the F-22, and mentored junior pilots who credit him with saving their careers. More applause. Dad was beaming. Mom was crying happy tears. I stood near the back, still holding that $50 bill. In recognition of his achievements, Colonel Davidson continued, it is my honor to promote Captain James Brennan to the rank of Major. The room erupted. Standing ovation. Dad stood so fast, his chair scraped loudly. Mom clutched her chest like her heart might burst with pride. James stepped forward. His commanding officer pinned on the new rank insignia. They saluted. The whole room joined in. I clapped, because what else was I supposed to do? When the applause finally died down, James stepped to the podium. Thank you, he said, voice strong and clear. clear. This honor belongs to more than just me. It belongs to my squadron, who execute flawlessly every single day, to my maintainers, who keep these incredible aircraft in the sky, and to my family. He gestured toward our parents. My father, Colonel Robert Brennan, who taught me what it means to serve with honor. Dad's chest puffed out. My mother, whose strength and sacrifice made all of this possible. Mom dabbed at her eyes. And to all the military families who understand the weight of service. Notice the phrasing, all the military families, not my family, because in James's mind, I wasn't really military. I was just adjacent. The IT guy who worked somewhere vaguely defense-related. The room gave him another standing ovation. I stayed seated. Across the room, in a section reserved for senior officers, I saw General Sterling. He wasn't standing. He wasn't clapping. He was watching me. Our eyes met. The question in his expression was clear. Are you ready? I gave the smallest nod. The decision had been made days ago. But in that moment, holding $50 and watching my brother bask in recognition while dismissing me as irrelevant, I knew it was the right one. Colonel Davidson returned to the podium as the applause faded. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention once more. The room quieted quickly. Military audiences are good at that. We have one additional item on tonight's agenda. Davidson glanced toward the VIP section. An unscheduled edition. That word, unscheduled, sent a ripple through the crowd. In military ceremonies, nothing is unscheduled. Senior officers began sitting up straighter. A few pulled out phones, checking for notifications they might have missed. At this time, Davidson said, voice taking on extra formality, it is my privilege to invite the Commander of Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance to the stage, Lieutenant General Everett A. Sterling. The energy in the room shifted immediately. Sterling was a 3-star general. You didn't just drop a 3-star into a major's promotion ceremony without cause. He rose from his seat, movements deliberate and measured, and walked to the stage. James looked confused. Dad was frowning. Mom's eyes darted around like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Sterling took the podium. Tonight, he began, voice carrying easily through the room, we celebrated a pilot, a warrior who flies into danger to protect our nation. He nodded toward James. Major Brennan represents the finest traditions of Air Force aviation. His courage is visible. His achievements are public. His valor is celebrated, as it should be. Murmurs of agreement. But there are other kinds of warriors, Sterling continued. Ones whose courage never makes headlines, whose achievements remain classified for years or decades, whose valor is measured not in flight hours, but in disasters that never happen. Behind him, the screen changed. The fighter jet footage dissolved into something else. Lines of code, network diagrams, a global map with threat vectors converging and then stopping. These warriors stand watch in the shadows, Sterling said, so that others may stand in the light. The room had gone completely silent now. A young Air Force captain approached the stage, carrying a slim folder bound with red tape and marked with classification stamps. Top secret, special access required, declassified by presidential order. The words were large enough to be read from the back of the room. A collective intake of breath. At 0600 hours this morning, Sterling said, the President of the United States authorized the declassification of Operation Nightfall. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. She had no idea why, but the gravity of the moment was impossible to miss. Operation Nightfall, Sterling continued, was a direct action cyber operation that prevented the downing of a military transport aircraft. That aircraft was carrying 247 American service members. Men and women with families, with children, with futures. The screen changed again. Photos of service members, young faces, older faces, people in uniform and people in civilian clothes, all of them smiling at cameras, none of them knowing how close they'd come to never making it home. Due to the decisive actions of Operation Nightfall's commanding officer, Sterling said, all 247 of those Americans arrived safely at their destination. Their families will never know how close they came to receiving folded flags. Absolute silence now. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. In recognition of extraordinary heroism, Sterling said, voice growing stronger, and in accordance with presidential authorization, the Air Force Cross is hereby awarded to the officer who commanded Operation Nightfall. The screen changed one more time. The Air Force Cross filled the display, the nation's second highest military decoration, given only for extraordinary heroism in combat. This officer, Sterling continued, is the youngest person in Air Force intelligence history to hold the rank of Brigadier General. My father's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. James's smile faltered. Mom made a sound like she'd been struck. He is here tonight, Sterling said, turning to face the audience, which is why I asked him to stand. The room erupted in whispers. It is my distinct honor, Sterling said, voice cutting through the noise, to invite Brigadier General Dylan Brennan to the stage. My name detonated in the room like a flashbang grenade. For 3 full seconds, nothing happened. Everyone was trying to process, to reconcile what they'd just heard with what they thought they knew. Then a brigadier general in the front row stood. Then another. A senator stood. A rear admiral. The applause started like a wave and crashed over the entire room. I stood. Didn't look at James. Didn't look at my parents. Just walked. Down the center aisle, past pilots and politicians and senior officers who were no longer looking past me, they were looking at me, actually seeing me. Some of them were saluting as I passed. On stage, General Sterling waited. When I reached him, he came to attention and saluted, a 3-star general saluting me. I returned the salute, then stood at attention while he unpinned the Air Force Cross from its case. The medal was heavier than I expected. The ribbon, blue with red and white stripes, settled against my chest with weight that felt both physical and metaphorical. Sterling stepped back and saluted again. The room went silent as I approached the podium. I could feel James's eyes on me, could sense my father's shock, could hear my mother's quiet sobs. "Thank you, General Sterling," I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "This honor belongs not to me, but to every person who works in the shadows, to the analysts who never sleep, to the cryptographers who break unbreakable codes, to the operators who prevent catastrophes you'll never hear about." I paused, scanning the room. We don't fly jets. We don't appear on magazine covers. We don't get standing ovations at officers' clubs. My eyes found James. We just keep Americans alive, quietly, without recognition, because that's what the mission requires. I stepped back from the podium. The room remained silent for a heartbeat. Then the applause came, thunderous, sustained, genuine. But I was already moving, walking down from the stage, past my brother, who stood frozen with that $50 bill still visible on the table beside his wine glass, past my father, whose mouth hung open in an expression somewhere between shock and disbelief, past my mother, whose tears had shifted from pride to something more complicated. General Sterling intercepted me near the exit. "Well done, General," he said quietly. "Thank you, sir. Your father's trying to catch up with you. I know. You going to stop?" I looked back. Dad was indeed pushing through the crowd, his face a mixture of confusion and desperate need to understand. "Not tonight," I said. "Tonight I'm going home. Tomorrow I'll start answering questions. But tonight, they finally saw you," Sterling finished. "Yeah, finally." I made it to my car before Dad caught up. "Dylan!" His voice cracked on my name. "Dylan, wait!" I stopped with my hand on the car door. He jogged the last few steps, breathing hard. At 63, he wasn't the warrior he'd been in his prime. "You're a general," he said, like he still couldn't believe it. "A brigadier general. You've been a general, and you never told us?" "I was promoted 8 months ago," I said quietly. "Classified promotion. Classified assignment. I couldn't tell you." But he struggled for words. We thought you did IT work." "I do. Just not the kind you were imagining. The Air Force Cross, Dylan. That's," his voice trailed off, "that's the second highest decoration we have. Your grandfather flew B-17s over Germany and never got the Air Force Cross. Different kind of war, Dad." He stared at me like I was a stranger. How long have you been doing this?" 11 years. Since MIT. 11 years, he repeated. "You've been a general officer for 8 months and you let me think you were just ordinary." "I let you think what you wanted to think," I said, harder than I intended. "You never asked about my work. Not really. You'd ask how the computer job was going, and I'd give vague answers, and you'd nod and change the subject to James's latest assignment or Dad's golf game." He flinched. "That's not fair, isn't it? Tonight, James gave me $50 for gas, in front of his entire squadron, like I was poor, like I needed charity. Do you know what I make, Dad?" He shook his head. "As a brigadier general with critical skills incentive pay and hazard duty pay, $240,000 a year. I don't need $50 for gas." He didn't know because none of you bothered to know. You all just assumed. Dad's face was crumbling. "We're proud of you. Now you are. Now that a 3-star general put a medal on my chest in front of 200 people. But last week, last month, last year, I was just the disappointment, the one who didn't follow the family tradition, the one who couldn't hack it in the real military. I never said that. You didn't have to." I opened my car door. "Dylan, please, let's talk about this. Come back inside. Your mother is beside herself. Mom is crying because she realized she didn't know her own son. That's not something we can fix with a conversation, Dad. That's something I've been living with for 11 years. What do you want from me?" His voice broke. "Tell me what you want and I'll do it." I stopped, looked at him, really looked at him. Colonel Robert Brennan, fighter pilot, hero, my father. And in that moment I realized something. I didn't need his validation anymore. I'd needed it once, desperately, achingly. But somewhere over the past 11 years, I'd outgrown that need. I had my own command, my own mission, my own pride. "I don't want anything, Dad," I said quietly. "I just want you to understand that the son you thought was ordinary has been saving lives while you were celebrating James's magazine covers. I just want you to sit with that for a while." I got in my car. Through the windshield, I could see him standing in the parking lot, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him look. I drove away. My phone rang 17 times before I turned it off. Messages piled up. Mom, Dad, James. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Suddenly, everyone wanted to talk. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to a quiet overlook near Great Falls Park and sat watching the Potomac River rush over the rocks. The Air Force Cross felt heavy on my chest. Real in a way most medals aren't, because I knew exactly what it represented. Not just my actions, but the 247 people who were alive because of those actions. My phone buzzed one more time before I'd turned it off. A text from General Sterling. "How do you feel?" I thought about it, typed back. "Like I finally exist. You always existed. They just couldn't see you. Now they can." can. What you do with that is up to you. What did I want to do with it? I sat with that question while the sun set over the river. 3 days later, my father showed up at my apartment. I lived in a secure building in Arlington. You needed a code to get into the parking garage, another code for the elevator, and a key card for my floor. The fact that he was standing at my door meant someone had let him in. How did you get up here? I asked, not opening the door fully. The concierge recognized my name, said you were his neighbor's commanding officer once. He called you a hero. Of course, Lieutenant Morrison. I'd recommended him for a promotion 2 years ago. What do you want, Dad? To talk, to understand, he trailed off, to meet my son, the one I apparently didn't know existed. I almost closed the door, almost. But something in his voice, something raw and broken, made me step aside. He came in slowly, like he was entering foreign territory. My apartment was nice, not extravagant, but comfortable. Large TV, good furniture, a wall of bookshelves filled with technical manuals and operational histories. And on one shelf, secured behind glass, my grandfather's World War II decorations. Dad stopped when he saw them. You kept Papa's medals. Of course I did. He was a hero. He'd be proud of you. Maybe, or maybe he'd have been like you, assuming I pushed papers instead of making decisions that affect national security. Dad flinched. I deserved that. Yeah, you did. He walked to my window, looking out at the skyline. I called some people, old friends who might know about your work. Do you know what they told me? That they can't discuss it, some of them. Others said, he turned to face me. Colonel Harris said he sat in a briefing where you explained a cyber operation to the Joint Chiefs. Said you were the youngest person in the room but the smartest. Said you answered questions from 4-star generals like you were teaching children. I didn't respond. Captain Nelson said you saved his life. He was flying a mission in hostile territory when his navigation system started giving bad coordinates. Said the malfunction was corrected remotely within 90 seconds. He didn't know who fixed it until yesterday when he saw your face on the news. Said you were the guardian angel he never knew existed. I was doing my job. General Morrison said you turned down 3 different positions that would have made you more visible, more celebrated, because you insisted on staying operational. Said you could be a 3-star by now if you'd taken the political route, but you chose missions instead of medals. Until Sterling made me take the medal. Sterling made you accept recognition you'd earned. Dad's voice shook. Dylan, I failed you. I spent 11 years assuming you were less, when you were actually more. More than me. More than James. More than I ever understood. I'm not competing with James. I know. That's what makes this worse. You never tried to compete. You never made it about who was better. You just quietly became extraordinary while I was too busy praising your brother to notice. We stood in silence. I don't know how to fix this, Dad said finally. I don't know how to make up for 11 years of being blind. You can't, I said. Not in a conversation. Not with an apology. The only thing you can do is see me now. Actually see me. And maybe eventually understand why I stopped trying to make you notice. I'm sorry. I know. Can we start over? I thought about that. About all the birthday dinners where James's achievements overshadowed mine. About the Christmas when I'd tried to explain my work and Dad had literally fallen asleep. About the 1,000 small moments where I'd been made to feel less than. We can't start over, I said, but we can start from here. Just don't expect it to be easy. And don't expect me to pretend the past 11 years didn't happen. He nodded slowly. Fair. James showed up 3 weeks later. I was at the gym, one of the few places I could reliably be found, since my work schedule was unpredictable. He walked in wearing civilian clothes, looking uncomfortable. They told me you were here, he said. Security guard. Another one of your people, apparently. Staff Sergeant Rivera. Good man. He said you saved his career once. I recommended him for a position that suited his skills. He did the rest. James fidgeted. Not a gesture I associated with my confident fighter pilot brother. I'm sorry, he said. For the $50. For the jokes. For the past. Jesus, Dylan. For everything. Okay, that's it, okay? What do you want me to say, James? That it's fine? It's not. That I forgive you? I'm not there yet, but I accept your apology. He slumped onto a bench. I had no idea about any of it. When they told me you were a general, I thought it was a joke. Then when Sterling showed that medal, when he described what you did, his voice cracked. 247 people, Dylan. You saved 247 people. It was a team effort. Stop. He looked up at me. Don't do that. Don't minimize it. I've spent my entire career being celebrated for doing my job. You've spent yours saving lives in secret and letting people think you were ordinary. You don't get to minimize it now. Fine. I saved 247 people. It felt good. It also gave me stress-induced insomnia for 2 weeks because if I'd made the wrong call, 247 families would have been notified of casualties. That's the job. Victories that feel like near misses because of what could have gone wrong. James was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how you do it. The same way you fly into hostile territory. You train, you trust your team, and you make the best decisions you can with the information you have. But I get to come home and talk about it. You come home and, what? Pretend you filed TPS reports all day? Something like that. He shook his head. I was a dick. Yeah, you were. Can we fix this? That's the second time someone in our family has asked me that question in 3 weeks. What did you tell Dad? That we can't erase the past, but we can move forward from here. James nodded slowly. I can live with that. Good, because I'm not interested in pretending the last 11 years didn't happen. You treated me like I was lesser, like my work didn't matter. brother. Like I was the embarrassing brother who couldn't cut it in the real military. That hurt. It still hurts. I know. But you're still my brother. And if you're actually interested in knowing who I am now, not who you thought I was, then we can figure it out. He stood, extended his hand. I shook it. Not a hug, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. It was a start.